Hi, I'm Kalika Sharma, and I'm here to teach you Illustrator basics for After Effects, specifically for motion design. Using Adobe Illustrator for motion design is different than using it for, let's say, print or web advertising. And if you've never used Illustrator before, you're in luck, because I'm actually going to start from the ground up. If you check out in the description of this live stream, there is a link for the files that I'm going to be using today. I'm going to start off by just going over some things that you should know about some Illustrator myths that you might have heard or that you might hold to be true yourself. Also going to talk about perhaps like who this course is really for, and then I'm going to dive into reasons why you should use Illustrator for motion design and how to use the software really from the ground up. Okay, so in the chat, feel free to just introduce yourself and talk about a little bit about your experience with Illustrator. That would be really helpful for me. So who is this course for? This course is for both people who've never used Illustrator before and for people who might have some Illustrator experience, but maybe not specifically for motion design. And I'm going to talk a lot about the differences between setting up files for motion design versus for other purposes. And really, when we're setting up files in Adobe Illustrator for motion design, the key is flexibility. So we want to sort of anticipate what some of the animation challenges might be when we're setting up our Illustrator file, like have those Illustrator files set up in such a way that moving forward, when we get into After Effects, we're just able to hit the ground running. Now, After Effects can design some vectors, but it is fairly limited. It's easier to do it in Illustrator, to be honest. All right, next we have the why. And why should we use Adobe Illustrator for motion graphics? And that's a really, really important consideration. A lot of folks think that, well, I know Photoshop, can't I just do everything in Photoshop? Well, you could, but it's going to make your life a lot harder, and it's going to mean that you're limited in terms of which clients you can work for and who you can collaborate with. So here are 4 major reasons why you should learn Adobe Illustrator for motion design. For one, it's vector artwork. Vector art is infinitely scalable. That means if you make something that's like this big in Adobe Illustrator, you can scale it up really huge, and you're going to be in luck because you can use it for so many different things. Let's say you, in your storyboards, have a close-up and a wide shot. You could easily just design the wide shot and then zoom in to the close-up without having to redo the artwork. Whereas if you were working with Photoshop, because it's based on pixels, have you ever seen like a really, really blown up Photoshop file? It's kind of gross, like a JPEG that's just been made bigger and bigger and bigger. It gets bitmappy, it looks really low resolution, and no, there's really no way that you can up-res a file like how they show on the CSI and like detective shows. It's just not possible. But if you're working with true vectors, meaning you're not putting photos into your Illustrator file and using those as an element of design, but you're creating all of the artwork in Illustrator, you can make it as big as you want. And so that's what I mean by infinitely scalable. And the reason why is because it's vector, and vectors are basically math. It's like you have a curve, you make the curve bigger. Because the curve is based on math and not pixels, it stays sharp. The second major reason to use Adobe Illustrator for motion design is client files. Your clients might be providing you files in Adobe Illustrator format, and it's really bad form to ask them for files in Photoshop format instead, just because you don't know Illustrator. Alternatively, they might provide files in InDesign, which isn't actually compatible with After Effects. The third major reason to learn Illustrator for motion design is your collaborators. You'll feel silly quitting a gig just because your collaborators are using Adobe Illustrator and you don't really know how to use it for After Effects. You want to keep those possibilities open. And the fourth reason is that it's essential. Aside from After Effects, Illustrator, Photoshop, and Premiere Pro are all essential tools for motion design. Next, let's talk about Illustrator myths. But before I do, I'm just going to visit the chat really quick. So Phyllis, hi Phyllis, she says, I use Illustrator every day, but I haven't used it for motion design. Okay, fair enough. And you'll get to learn how to use it for motion design because it is a decent amount different. Leah says she's a filmmaker and artist interested in adding animation and more motion graphic work. And yes, when you're a filmmaker, there are so many pixels, and when you're working with photography, there's so many pixels, but when you're working with Illustrator, you have a lot more flexibility, which is pretty cool. Okay, so Illustrator myths. The first myth I'm going to address is that you need to know the whole app in order to use it well. I got a secret for you. Most of us motion designers don't know the entire app. We just know what we need to know in order to do our jobs, which is probably 30% of the software. You don't need to know the entire thing. You just need to know how to use it for what you need it to do. Okay? Some people think it's really complicated. Well, it could be complicated, but you just need a tour guide. It's like so many things. Like a college campus feels really complicated. New York City feels really complicated until you get a map. And once you have the map, you're like, oh, look, there's a system. And once you learn the system, once you learn how the app works, you'll be able to figure it out. Trust me. Another myth that I've heard quite a bit is that it's only for illustrations or that it's just for drawing. And by illustrations, I mean like characters and cartoons and things like that. And while Illustrator is great for drawing cartoons and illustrations, it's also fantastic for graphic design. It's also wonderful for laying out text and graphics together and so on. Another myth is that if you can't draw, you'll be bad at it. Not so. I'm a little embarrassed about my drawing skills, to be honest. I don't think they're fantastic. I tend to draw little tiny designs, and then I'll scan them in and I'll put them into Illustrator, and oh my gosh, after I'm done designing them, I actually like them. So it's okay if you can't draw or if you think you can't draw, because Illustrator makes it easier for you to smooth things out and make something look sharp and polished and professional. Another myth is that it's not that important to learn. Maybe I'll learn it some other time. Well, motion design is a rapidly growing field. There's motion design everywhere. You scroll through just an article on the New York Times, and there are little ads that show up that are all animated. There are ads that are in subway stations. They are like constantly on television, of course, but they're on every website, and there's always new places that animation is showing up. And plus, because of the pandemic and social distancing, there are actually more opportunities for animation, and that's because filming is a lot more complicated. Live action filming is a lot more complicated, and because of that, there are more opportunities for motion design, and because there are more opportunities for motion design, all the more reason to learn more about it. So we're just going to cover the essentials today. In the description, there's a bit.ly link, and you can download the files that I'm going to be using to demonstrate how to use the different Illustrator tools for After Effects. So here's what we're going to cover in the demo. Okay, so we're going to be working with creating a new document, working with artboards, working with layers, using the shape and drawing tools, the pen tool, And along the way, we're going to be using photos and sketches as a basis and a little bit of Q&A. So again, check out the files that are listed in the description. And I'm going to show you a couple things here that are in the folder. Okay, so first there's a folder called blank files. And inside the folder called blank files, I have a blank AI file that is an HD document. I have one that's 1080 square, and I have one that is multi-boards. So I have these 3 blank Illustrator files, and I'm going to show you why. And the reason why I created these, and I actually created these for myself because it just frustrates me when I open an Illustrator file. I'm going to show you. So here is Adobe Illustrator. Bring over the window. Hello, window. There you are. And when you click over on the left, create new, that's the best way to do it. Then you can choose from the top, film and video. And the television standard is actually the second button here. So 720p is like a smaller television screen. This is the 1920 by 1080 pixel format that we use for television. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom into that really quick. 1920 by 1080. Okay. Oops, hold on. There we go. Getting used to some new hotkeys on this computer, sorry. So, okay, that's 1920 by 1080. And you can choose how many artboards. And artboards are basically your canvas, what you're going to be drawing on, okay? And if you wanted to customize this, like for, let's say, Instagram, if you click on View All Presets, you would think that Illustrator has gotten hip to Instagram, but it totally hasn't. So you would have to go into the width area here and just change that to be 1080. What can you do? So when you hit Create, it creates this new file, and you see like this sea of checkerboard, and it's really disorienting, and I don't like it. The checkerboard basically indicates that we're looking at a transparent background. Okay, we get it. It's a transparent background. How do we shut it off? So if you go to View menu and you go to Hide Transparency Grid, it's going to hide that grid. Better. Okay, so now it's white. But the white, remember, is an illusion. It's just nothing's there. Then you're going to want to probably turn off some of these rulers. So you can go to the View menu, and there's a thing that says Rulers, and you can say Hide Video Rulers. Oh, thank God, the video rulers are now hiding. And what's remaining is our title and action safety. The title safety is the inner one, the action safety is the outer one. And when you're designing stuff for television, you generally want any readable text to be inside the inner one, and any important action to be inside of the outer one. If you're designing stuff for the web, it's a little bit more lenient. You can go out to the outer edge of this guy on the left, top, and right. But at the bottom, you still want to be up a couple. And the reason why is because of that play bar. Okay, the play bar is going to take up a lot of space. Sometimes there's ads that pop up, and you don't want your important messaging to get lost in that. So I like to keep it open. If you don't like it, it's really easy to turn it off. Okay, so this is our artboard, right? Wrong. There's a mistake in the software. I don't think they fixed it yet, but basically if you go to the Artboard Tool, and let me just turn this on here. The Artboard Tool is right here to the left of the magnifying glass. You're going to click on that, and when you do that, in this Properties window that comes up, you're going to see a bunch of information about your artboards, okay? And if this isn't showing up, it's because you need to adjust your workspace. So regardless if you're on a PC or a Mac, here's where you find it. Window, Workspace, And I like Essentials. Essentials is my favorite. And if it still doesn't look like mine, you can go to Window, Workspace, Reset Essentials. Okay, brilliant. So now my toolbox probably looks more like yours. So again, that Artboard Tool was located right here above the magnifying glass. Okay? All right. So when I click on it and I go over here in the Properties window to edit artboards, I get information about my artboards. Cool. Okay. Well, let's click on Artboard Options. And if I look down at the bottom here, it tells me that there are 2 artboards. Dude, why are there 2 artboards? Well, it's because of this silly situation that Adobe Illustrator in this template accidentally put a second artboard in there. Rats. So how we get rid of it. So what you got to do is you switch over to the other artboard, which again is your canvas, and you click on your Artboard Options, and you want to actually select that second artboard in order for that to happen. To select it, you got to zoom out. So Command or Control minus, Command minus if you're on a Mac. And where are you? Where are you, second artboard? Well, if I scroll here, holy cow, look at where my second artboard is. That is insane. It's way, way out in the great beyond, and that's just silly. So I want to get rid of it. You can just hit the delete key on your keyboard to get rid of it, and it's gone, and then you can return to the normal world of this first artboard. Okay, better. So what I've done for you in those blank files is I've actually provided these commonly used setups, so you don't have to go through that process of deleting the artboard and turning off the transparent grid and the video rulers and so on. You're welcome. To open it up, just go to your Adobe Illustrator, File, Open, and navigate over to that folder. You might need to unzip the file because it's zipped, but you know, you can figure that out. And when you click on HD document 16:9 and hit open, look at that. It's fantastic. It's ready to go. And if you miss those title and action safety guides that we had in the other version, you can just click on the Artboard tool again, click on Artboard Options, and you can show video safe areas right here. Okay, show video safe areas. And I like the center mark because I like to cheat to know where things are at any given time. Okay, so anyways, just get back out of here. Cool. So there is my artboard. I'm ready to start doing stuff. So before I start working with this blank AI file, lest I screw it up, I'm going to save it with my video guides there. And then I'm going to do File, Save As. So save and then Save As. And in the Save As, I'm going to call this Star Bowl because that's what I'm going to make. I'm going to make a bowl full of stars. Now, I'm not really good at drawing things out of my head, so I'm going to show you how to bring in a photo to use as a reference that nobody needs to know about. It'll be our little secret. So I'm going to go over to Layers over here on the right. And if you don't see your Layers window for some reason, you can always go to Window and choose Layers there. And I'm going to bring in a photo for reference. So I'm going to double click this and call this Ref. And I'm going to go to File, Place. And when you choose Place, it's actually going to allow you to bring in an external file. And there's something to be known about this. When you choose the file that you're going to bring in, you have a choice between linking it to your Adobe Illustrator file or embedding it. I'm going to talk about the difference really quick here. So have you ever opened up an HTML file and it would, like your computer was offline, but you had the HTML file, and you just see like all these weird empty boxes because the pictures aren't linking to the server. Yeah, if you set that up to link, there's the possibility that those images will get lost. Can you package them later? Yeah, absolutely. But I much prefer to just not link them in the first place. If Adobe Illustrator is willing to eat that file and hold it within itself, like, why not? Why not just keep it there? So I'm going to say okay to the bowl, not to the link. Ugh, that link just makes me crazy when people use it. And just keep that turned off, okay? And just be aware that it might automatically be turned on. Then you're going to hit place. But it doesn't just place it. It does this creepy thing where it attaches it to your mouse. And you're like, wait, why are you attached to my mouse? So I'm going to draw a box within which I want this bowl to live. And I want the bowl to live like right down here. And notice I don't have to hold shift or anything. Look, Ma, one hand. I'm just dragging that. And it gave me a little place for my bowl. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to place my bowl here. And it's kind of dark. So I'm going to change its properties a little bit. So if you have something selected here and you go over to the properties, it's going to give you all kinds of information about the thing that you're working with. So it tells me where it's located in the transform section. It tells me whether it has a fill, which would be the color inside, or a stroke, which is a line that goes around it. But it also tells me about the opacity. Now the reason the fill is coming up with this weird like question mark is because it's a photo inside. So it's like, you're not really using a color, so I don't know what that is. Fine. We'll forgive you, Illustrator. But we do want to adjust the opacity. So I'm going to drop the opacity a bit so that I can use it as what I call a cheap light box. You might have heard me use this phrase before. So there's my cheap light box. I'm going to go back over to Layers tab, and I'm going to lock it. And this is the secret to my success with Illustrator, is that I have idiot-proofed this program against myself. Because it's so easy in Illustrator to end up with multiple things on one layer. And I don't want that. If you want things to animate individually from each other, don't put them in one layer together. They have to be separate. So because this is my reference, I'm going to lock it. And the lock icon is right next to the eyeball in the layers window. Okay, so I make another new layer. And in this new layer, I'm going to start tracing. But here's a trick that I learned. If you drag this below your reference, you're still going to be able to see your reference on top, which is pretty darn cool. So I made the layer, I dropped it below my reference, and I'm going to zoom in here. So I get finer control. That's one of my tricks. If you're not great with like fine motor, like if you're one of those people who has like really terrible handwriting, or you're not great with drawing, zoom in and you'll get more control over your mouse. You can also use a Wacom tablet and pen, and that makes things much easier as well. Okay, so remember, I locked my reference layer, which means that any artwork I create is going to end up on the layer below it. And I'm going to call this back of bowl. Okay, and the reason why is because I want the back of the bowl and the front of the bowl to be separate, and I'm going to fill this bowl up with stars. So the back of the bowl I'm going to keep on its own layer, and there's this little circle right here I want to show you. This little circle, I call this the belly button. It's not the official term, but I call it the belly button. You click on that, and then you are guaranteed to actually draw on the layer that you have selected. It's, again, idiot-proofing the program against myself. So you got to choose a color, and we're going to be working with fill for this. Like I want this to be a filled shape. So I go over to the left-hand side. I click on the fill color. I can double-click to get the color picker. And I can choose a nice color, okay? And I'm going to make this dark red. And you can choose shapes to draw with over here in the rectangle tool area, okay? And in case you can't see that, here's the rectangle tool. You don't have to use rectangles though. You can click and hold that, and you have the choice between an ellipse, a polygon, or a star, okay? And I'm going to choose the ellipse because that most closely resembles the shape of the back of the bowl. So I'm going to draw my ellipse like this. Okay, and it's just sort of ghosted right now. It's not showing me the whole thing as I'm drawing it. I'm going to do that again because it was so fun. So here we go. See, it just shows me the outline. All right, fine. And then I can adjust this further. But you can't adjust it further with the shape drawing tool because the shape drawing tool just wants to draw shapes. That's all it wants to do. So I'm going to adjust it using the selection tool, and that lets me scale things. So I can pull the top right there, and that let me scale it a little bit. It also will let me rotate it if I want, which I don't want. And if I hover, not clicking, just hovering over the edge, it gives me this double-ended arrow, which lets me scale it just along one axis. And by one axis, I mean either horizontally or vertically. Now, if you want to keep it centered, this is something that made me crazy when I first started using Illustrator. I'd be like, dude, I just want you to stay centered, and it would just scale from one side. And you're like, oh, now it's not centered anymore. Hold the Option or Alt key, and it will stay centered as you're dragging, which is so nice. Thanks, Illustrator. Sweet. Okay. So I have that, and then I'm going to add some more to it. So to add some more to it, I'm thinking it's kind of squarish, so I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to choose the rectangle tool. And I'm going to put this all on the same layer as the back of the bowl. Let's look at the layers window for a moment. In the layers window, we've got this little twirly triangle, which wasn't there when I hadn't drawn anything on the layer, which means that if you don't see this little twirly triangle, that means there's nothing on the layer. If I open up the twirly triangle, look, there's an ellipse. Fantastic. So the ellipse tool right there, or the ellipse shape right there, is this shape right here. And if you want to select a shape by itself, just click its little belly button. Selects the shape. Sweet. So let's grab up the rectangle tool. I'm going to belly button that back of bowl layer, and I'm going to click and draw the shape of the sides of the bowl. And I'm going to pull the side out like that. Okay. And see how I have a nice view of what's going on here. I don't need like the whole back of the bowl. That is not necessary, but I do want the sides to kind of come in a little bit. Okay. So let's round out the tops and pull in the sides. So if I drag these little circles, you see how every one of my corners is rounding out? Yeah, interesting. My rule of thumb when it comes to working with Illustrator files is really to use as few points as possible. And unfortunately, when you do that circle thingy, it creates like a decent amount more points. I mean, this didn't do too bad, but sometimes it makes a lot. So, all right, how do we fix this? I'm going to adjust these top guys until they fit the way that I want them. And then I can use my arrow keys on the keyboard to just nudge this guy into place. Okay, and this doesn't need to match my Illustrator file exactly, because I'm going to show you a little trick to make this not need to be perfect on both sides. Okay, so then I'm going to take just these corners right here. You can't do that with the first selection tool, because the first selection tool is just your selection tool. It just wants to select big chunks of thing. We don't want to select big chunks of thing. We just want to select little things. So if we switch over to the direct selection tool, we can click and drag on just the bottom. See that? And then I can pull those guys down. And if I hold the shift key while I'm pulling them down, look at that. It just like keeps them constrained, like it's going to keep it moving downward. Okay? And then I can pull these guys inward like that. And that's looking pretty good. I'm not hating that shape on the side. Besides, it is the back of my bowl, so I really don't need to care that much. Now, if I pull this up, you should start to see these little smart guides. And if you're not seeing smart guides, you can always go to View and turn on smart guides. Smart guides are amazing. And again, I'm moving these points by themselves using the direct selection tool. And if you're moving these, it'll kind of snap to being lined up with your existing points. Now, I thought that was straight up here, and if I drag down, it's like trying to snap to something else. So I think that's pretty good. Cool. All right, so the back of the bowl is pretty much done because I want the front of the bowl to overlap this and just have this lip here, okay? So if this is the back of the bowl color, I want to have a different color for the front of the bowl, but I don't want to screw up what I've done here. I don't want to screw up the back of the bowl. So I lock it. So I lock the little layer right here because that future-proofs my project a little bit. And if you haven't saved your project, that would be a good time to do it. So go to File, Save, and there it is. Star Bowl is now saved. I'm going to make another new layer, and there's two ways you can make a new layer. You can either click down at the bottom here. There's like this little like plus inside a box in the very lower right corner. And there's also this little, I call this the hamburger icon on the far right, and you can click that and get a new layer as well. Okay, so if I do new layer right there, and this is going to be my front of bowl, then I can make the front of the bowl. So I'm going to this time use the ellipse. So I'm going to click and choose the ellipse. I'm going to change the color because otherwise it's not going to stand out. So I'm going to choose a slightly lighter color here, hit OK, and I'm going to do this. Okay, and it's not quite the shape that I want, but I'm going to show you how to fix it. And I'm just focusing on one half of this because this is like too complicated for me to try to do it any other way. So just focusing on the one side. And I'm not even paying attention, whoops, undo. I'm not even paying attention to the base of the bowl. That's going to be separate. Okay, so there's that. And then I can actually add a point right here if I want to. So to add a point to an existing shape, you can go to the pen tool, you can click right here, and then switch back to the direct selection tool. So if you're one of those people who loves hotkeys, let me just type some out for you. I'm going to make a new layer and just call it hotkeys so that you can see all of them. Hotkeys, and right here, I'm going to type in some hotkeys. So when you use the type tool, it automatically gives you dummy text, which I kind of like. And I'm just going to type in what the hotkeys were that we talked about so far. So V is for the selection tool. I'm just going to say selection because they're all tools. A is for the point selection. Then we have P for the pen. Okay. And I'm going to take the pen tool, and I made that extra point, and I can't see it unless I have the shape selected, and there's that point. Now, something to know about working with the pen tool: when a point is selected, it's filled in, and when it's not selected, it is empty. So I'm going to take that point that's filled in, and I'm just going to move it over, okay? And that's going to make a better shape. And I'm sure some of you are like, dude, why is this such a weird shape? Like, that doesn't look right. I'm going to fix it, don't worry. So I'm going to pull this across a little bit. I'm not going to worry about the other half here. And I'm going to do a couple of things. Let me create the front lip of my bowl. And I'm going to do that with the ellipse. And the front lip, I'm going to carve it out using a new shape. I know, kind of crazy, right? Why would I do that? Well, getting good at Illustrator is all about figuring out how you can use the tools that they have in order to make your job easier. And sometimes that means that you are like combining shapes in different ways. So have you ever been to somebody's house and you go to their kitchen and you're looking for the spoons, let's say, and you open a drawer and you're like, holy crap, that person has a lot of cookie cutters. That's what Illustrator has. It's called the Pathfinder window. So if you go to Window, Pathfinder, here's the Pathfinder window. And the Pathfinder window lets you take existing shapes and cut things out using them, almost like working with stencils. So I'm going to turn off the back of the bowl layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this ellipse from this bigger shape. So I'm going to select the outer shape, and I'm doing this with my selection tool. Select the outer shape, select the inner ellipse, and this is with the shift key held down, so I got them both, right? And you can choose minus front, and you know which one is in front because it has the little thin ellipse in front of the larger path. Front means on top. And you can use minus front to eliminate the thing that's in the front. Now the problem is it's still going to leave the thing in the back. So let's try the divide instead. Divide is the one that I find to be the most useful. What divide does is it breaks it up into lots of different pieces. So now I have my ellipse there, which if I don't want, I can hit the delete key. I have this little bit, and see how I'm clicking on the little belly buttons here, and that's highlighting that thing in my artboard, like right here. Yeah, pretty sweet, right? And then I can just hit the delete key. That guy's gone. And then right here, that's another little schnibble that I don't need. And then up at the top, I can just hit delete. And look, it's starting to look like a bowl. And if I turn on the back of the bowl and the front, yeah, I think that is somewhat acceptable. I can probably do a little bit better with the edge, but you know, it's fine. And then I can make the base of the bowl as a separate piece, also with the ellipse tool, also with the same color if I wish, right? And the ellipse looks stupid, so I'm going to switch and I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw that little base, and I'm going to switch over to the black selection tool here. Let's zoom in a bit. Ah, there's my little roundy handles. That's the very technical term for them. And now I've got roundy handles and I've got the front of the bowl. Okay. And if I wanted to just adjust this little guy right here, I could just pull that down. Okay. Now with the pen tool, okay, when you make a point, or when you're using the direct selection tool, you get these handles off the points, and that kind of confuses some people. You can drag these handles to get a better shape, which is really nice. Sometimes the handles, though, are connected to each other. You see how that changed both the left and the right of the bowl? Not crazy about that. So if you wanted to break the handles so that you could adjust them independent of one another, you would do that using a different tool, which is called the anchor point tool. Now, in After Effects, they call this the Convert Vertex tool. I don't like calling it the anchor point tool because there's a different anchor point in After Effects. These points in Illustrator are actually technically called anchor points. I call them path points. It makes my life easier so I don't have to memorize two sets of terminology. So if you switch over to the neighbor of the pen tool, just by clicking, sorry, not neighbor, but the dude who lives in the basement of the pen tool, click and hold the pen tool, and then you'll access that. Then you can actually break your handles, and then they can move independent of one another, which is really nice. Okay? And then I can take my direct selection. I can adjust this handle here, adjust this handle here. And again, I'm trying to use as few points as possible in order to get this, this bowl drawn. Okay? There, I'm pretty happy with that. I don't like the right side, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to do a quick little trick to get this to work better. So I'm going to take my rectangle tool. Well, hold on. First, we'll combine these two. I want to combine these. So I can use my Pathfinder again, and I can click on this first shape mode, and the first shape mode is actually going to combine the two shapes together. Pretty nice. Okay. So, hold on. Look at that. That was nice of you. Thank you, Illustrator. Thank you so much. Okay, and then I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and I'm going to just break this up, break it up like this. okay? And I'm going to make sure that the rectangle is in front of the bowl, and I'm going to minus front. Oh, come on. If it doesn't work, click the belly button of the main layer and then do minus front. Not bad. And let me just take this and I'm going to duplicate and flip it. So to duplicate a thing in your layer window, you can hold the Option or Alt key and drag up, and that makes a copy. Alternatively, of course, you could, I guess, copy using edit, copy, and then you could do your paste in place. It's the same thing. Anyway, and then I'm going to flip it. Object, transform. Where are you, dude? There we go. Transform. Ta-da. Reflect. Reflect means that you're going to get like the copy going like this. Okay? So I do reflect. I'm going to reflect vertical and I'm going to hit OK. Ew, that's terrible. So that's because it didn't obey my situation there. Let's try that again. So object transform, reflect, and preview. I guess that's the best it's going to do. There's probably a way I could do it otherwise. I'm just going to move this over, and it kind of snaps because of those smart guides. Click off and just zoom way the heck in and make sure there's no gap in between, and that's pretty solid. And I'm going to combine these two using my Pathfinder. Click that first button to unite. Nice. Hit A to check out your anchor points or your path points. I want to pull this down and make it roundy, just this one middle point here, okay? And in order to take that point and make it roundy, remember you go over to your pen tools basement buddy, and you're gonna, if you click it one time, duck, it's supposed to give you handles, but if it doesn't, you can just pull the handles yourself. One nice thing about it though is that the handles come on left and right, and you can then just use your down arrows to kind of push that down. Okay, that's better. And remember letter A for the anchor tool. And I think, yeah, if I just pull that out there and then I pull this out here, it's going to round out that side too. I just try to make those look equal. All right, that's decent. I'm going to show my back of my bowl, and I can take the whole layer of the front of the bowl and just move it up a little bit. Because remember, nobody's going to see my reference. They're not going to be like, oh, 40 lashes with a wet noodle because you did the bowl like a little different than your reference. No, most people don't really care that much. So the front of the bowl, I clicked that little belly button and I moved it up with my arrow keys, and that worked pretty well. Next, I'm going to just fix the back of the bowl because that looks silly. Let's turn off the reference so we can see our result. Not too bad. And you see the back of the bowl here, and I can't control it right now because it's locked. So we'll lock everybody else and just focus on the back of the bowl there. Okay? So I'm going to take those 2 points and just left arrow them over so that they're hiding. Okay? Better. All right. So how are we doing so far? Does this make sense to you guys? Like how the layers are coming together with this very powerful Pathfinder tool. I started a little more complex with working with the pen and the Pathfinder and stuff, but you guys can handle it. I'm going to show you some cool things that you can do with the shape drawing tools next. Okay, so before we move on, any questions on working with the pen tool or the Pathfinder or the point selection tool? Feel free to drop them into the chat. Okay. All right, next I'm going to create a ground plane for this and a background, because remember, this background that we're seeing, there's nothing there. It's just an empty void. So I'm going to lock my back of bowl, create a new layer by clicking the little thing at the bottom. This is going to be my ground, and I'm going to choose a color here. It's not horrible, maybe something kind of in the light yellow-gray family. And I'm going to use my rectangle tool. And I'm going to make sure that it extends past the edges of the frame. It looks kind of goofy if you, oh, hi Carlos. It looks kind of goofy in After Effects if you pull the background just exactly to the edges. You might end up with like weird like gaps and stuff. So I always err on the side of being a little bit too far out to the sides. All right, so that extends past my artboards, which is fine. And then I'm going to create some shapes to drop down and a backdrop. So this is my ground, and if I don't want to mess with it, I lock it. And this is really important because supposing I have this selected, right? And then I decide to make a background, and I'm going to use a gradient for this. So fancy. You're going to run into a situation where you're like, all right, I didn't want to change that. So I'm just going to show you really quick. So here's the gradient tool. And the gradient tool, you can choose what kind of colors you're going to use. So you go to Window, Gradient. Okay, make a nice radiant gradient, get it? So you click on that, and what? It went on my ground plane. Not cool. Let's just undo that. See what happens when we don't lock our layers? And then we're going to make our backdrop. So I'm going to take my rectangle, I'm going to make my backdrop, okay, and then I can fill it with a gradient if I want to. So I can just click on the gradient and it fills it in. And if I want that to be behind my countertop, I can just pull it behind. Now I'm not crazy about the direction of this gradient, I'm not crazy about the colors of the gradient, but we're going to fix it. So I'm going to click on Edit Gradient, and you can take these little knobbies and move them so that it's like a different like shape of gradient. So like maybe it ends faster, but I want it to actually fully be rotated. Okay, and to rotate it, we need to change the orientation of it. And I always forget how to do this. Bear with me for a second. This is for scaling it. And feel free to drop in the chat if you're like, Lika, I totally know how to do this. Let me help you. So in a pinch, you can always just rotate. And that worked to rotate the gradient as well. So that's good. And then I can take my selection tool and scale that out to the sides. Okay, so now I have like a gradient, but it's in like these like kind of terrible colors. I'm going to fix that in a minute. Let's zoom out, Control or Command minus, and then we can pull that down like so and go up like that. Sweet. And this is like for the softness of the gradient. Okay, these little controls. Now I accidentally created a new knob. You can hit the whoops. You can click the trash icon when a knob is selected in your gradient slider in order to affect how many knobs you have. And the knobs are really just for control. So if you want to change the color, you can either click on Edit Gradient. Well, no, you can't click on Edit Gradient. I lied. You can double click on the little knob and it brings up this like color picker thing. You can choose a color like that. You can double click this little color chip and change the color that way. So I'm not crazy about that color. I think that's weird. So I'm going to give it like kind of a lightish blue-ish, and then it's not going to go to black because that's just super depressing. So, come on, undo. There. Double click the black, and then I can choose a different color for it to go to. That is just way too loud. So I'm going to double click the little color chip that showed up here in the gradient controller. See that? Ta-da. And then I can bloop, change that color as well. So something a little more muted, less saturated. If I go to the left, it's a little less saturated. Yeah, I think that's all right. I'm not thrilled with it, but whatever. And we can just pull that down, and that's starting to look a little bit more attractive. Sweet. So my background is ready. I can just call it BG. Lock it. Let's make some shapes next. So any questions about the gradient tool? Questions, comments, smart remarks? Okay. So I'm going to make another new layer here, and it's going to go between the front of the bowl and the back of the bowl, and I'm going to make some little stars. click and hold the rectangle tool and go to the star tool. And I don't want the stars to be gradient because that's not going to really look that good. So I'm going to click on maybe this little first color here, which is pretty nice. See that? Like below the color picker, there are these 3 little boxes. One is for your gradient, one is for no filling at all, and one is for the color that you last used. So I'm going to use the last used color. And because everything else is locked, I'm not running the risk of accidentally screwing that up. So double click that to change the color further. And maybe I'll make it like a little light creamy yellow or bright creamy yellow. Yeah, good. Okay, and I'm gonna make a star. Now when you click and hold the star tool, see, it makes a star. If I use the up arrow, it adds more points to my star. If I use the down arrow, it reduces the points of my star until they're triangles. But that's my default star, okay? And here's something kind of fun that you can try. You can use your direct selection tool and just select the inside points here. And I'm doing this with the shift key to get multiple points. And then you can like pull all of those in, I think. Let's see. Can we pull all of those in? Yeah, I'm sure there's a way we can pull all of those in. You can adjust the shape like this, or you can move those points. You can round things using these roundy things. It's pretty nice. But just by its default, you can just make the star like that and adjust the number of points using your up and down arrow keys. Nice. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is make different sizes of stars. And it can be a real drag to have to like keep making more layers every time you want to draw something. So here's what I do. I keep making more layers, and you can rotate them a little bit if you want. And I'm making them different sizes. Okay. Lots of different sizes. And maybe I'll make them different. I'll give them drop shadows or something in After Effects, fine. But now if I swivel open layer 6, you see how all of these guys are like connected to each other? Here's a handy trick to get things to be independent of one another. And by the way, this lesson is probably going to go until about 12:30, so hopefully you can stick around for the whole thing. So I'm going to go to the little hamburger icon, and here's something cool you can do. Release to layers sequence. Now you have to have your topmost layer belly button selected here. So you see how layer 6, the belly button is clicked on, so it's double circled. And then I go to the hamburger icon and I go release to layers sequence. Now I don't know why they call it this. Basically what it's doing is it's turning each of those stars into its own sub layer. But like if I swiveled this closed, After Effects is still going to recognize this as a single layer because After Effects only recognizes top layer names. It doesn't recognize like the individual dudes that are inside. So what does that mean? Well, it means you got to drag these guys out of here. So click the first, shift click the last, and drag them up above layer 6. Now I only recommend not being precise with your layer naming in situations like this where you have different layers and they are all the same thing. You can leave it. If there's one element that you have multiple layers of, just leave it. Don't waste your time renaming stuff. You're good. And then I can take this guy and I can hit the trash because layer 6 is no longer being used. Now something goofy happens when you import an Illustrator layered file and part of it is sticking out of the edge of your artboard. It's not going to recognize the part that's outside of the artboard, unfortunately. So you got two choices. You either drag it down or you make your artboard just slightly bigger to accommodate that extra artwork. And it's not that big of a deal to do. So what you'll do is you'll take your Artboard tool and then you'll just take the top of it and just drag upward until you include all of the art. And then you'll switch back to your selection tool and maybe extend any of your other art that needs it. So my background needs to be extended slightly. I lock all my stars, unlock the background, turn on that belly button, and then just drag up. And that's better. Okay, so this file is basically ready for animation. And the reason why it's ready for animation is that each of the layers that are going to animate separately are each on their own layer. And if I dragged each of these stars down into the bowl, look what happens. The front of the bowl hides the part of the star. Now, if this were designed for print, you might not have those layers set up this way, but it's important to keep in mind how a layered file is going to be animated while you're in the design process for it. Other times you might end up receiving a file from your client that's not quite ready for animation. You should always open that Illustrator file, save it as a new name, and adjust it so that it is animation ready. Okay, and I will show you how to do that. Maybe not today, but I'll show you how to do that in a future lesson. Okay, so we've talked about the artboard, we've talked about layers, we've talked about the shape and drawing tools, the Pathfinder, and the pen tool. So let me show you how you could approach creating something that is a layered file for maximum effect in After Effects. So I'm going to save my star bowl. And if we have time at the end, I'll do a little demo of how to animate this all coming together. We're going to move on to another illustration. But before we do, are there any questions about this one? I'm keeping an eye on the chat now. Nothing yet? Okay, if something comes up, feel free to drop me a note. And let's get in here. So I have here my file that I had set up, and I'm going to do File, Save As, and this is going to be my mountains. Okay, and I'm going to place a JPEG photo of mountains. So File, Place, and this is where it gets into how designing for After Effects is markedly different than designing for print or the web. Okay, so here is my photo, and oh, it's squashing. All right, so I just did a little undo redo, and it's undo is Control Z on a PC, Command Z on a Mac. Redo is Shift Command Z. And Shift Control Z on a PC. Okay, so if you want to stay proportional, you have to hold the Shift key down. And I'm just going to pull this until I like the shape of how the mountains are looking. And I'm going to do a quick demo for you of how you would set something like this up for for After Effects in Illustrator. So once again, I'm going to turn on the little belly button. I go to Properties, and I'm going to reduce the opacity. And then I'm going to rename it Ref, lock it, and make a new layer. Okay, and I probably want to make another, I want to bring in another copy of that image just so that I have the colors. And remember, when you choose that image, you want to not have the link turned on. I hit place, I click a little box just like that. Okay, and then I have my colors, and let's see if that works. I'm gonna make a new layer, click the little belly button, and I'm gonna just start drawing with the pen tool this time. Now, there are other tools for drawing, but I really like just the straight up pen tool. It makes it really easy to get stuff going on. And I'm gonna do with the pen tool the back row of mountains first. So this mountain here, look how I'm doing it. I'm clicking and clicking to make a sharp point, and dragging to make a rounded point. And there's a couple of different ways that you can approach drawing something like this. I'm like way not zoomed in far enough. I'm just going to zoom in. I'm doing that with Control plus. You could do it alternatively with Command plus on a Mac. Or you could use the zoom tool, which remember is the bottommost tool in your toolbox. Okay, so I'm click dragging wherever the curve changes. Okay, and I'm going to have this, and I'm going to do this just a little faster and more general. Okay, and then this guy is going to go up here and there and there and there and so on. Okay, and this whole back mountain is all going to be one layer. Okay, and I think that's enough. Whoops. Click and click dragging to make it rounded. There. Okay, and I'm going to zoom out, and it helps to have that Command or Control minus in your pocket there. I'm using the scroll wheel to move over, and then I close it. Notice how this extends like all the way down, like all the way down. I want to make a guide to help me, so I go View, Rulers. Okay, Show Rulers. And if I drag a guide down from the ruler, look at that. I can use that as like the basis for all of my stuff. I forgot to put the reference on top. That makes it easier. And this is a dumb color. This is white. Like, no, it should not be white. So let's put our color reference up on the very top, and I'm going to choose that color. Okay, and so this is going to be like a very vague mountain scene, and that's fine. So I'm not going to do every single layer, but I'll show you enough. The next layer up is going to be the mountains that are happening in front of it. So I'm going to grab up my pen tool once more, P for pen, and I'm going to show you a slightly different tactic for drawing things with the pen tool. And some people like this method better. What we do is we just click. We don't click drag, we just click. And you only click where you think you might need to make something rounded or pointed, okay? And I'm gonna go all the way down. Oops, let's turn on the visibility there so I can get my guide. We're gonna go all the way down to the floor on this one too. And that's just so that the overlap works better when we're working in After Effects, okay? And so now, once I have that, I can go back in by zooming in, okay, and using my direct selection tool, and I can round things out if I want to. Alternatively, I can use the anchor point tool. The hotkey for that is Shift C, remember? That lets you create those handles and break them, okay? Here I want it rounded, so I click and drag. And because that point is now highlighted, I can just use my arrow keys to nudge it upward. Now if I want to create a new pen point here, I can hit P for pen and then click, and it creates a new pen point, and I can just move that downward. Okay, that's pretty nice. And I can take this area here and just make it a little less bulgy, like that. Okay, and I would need another point here, so P for pen, fine. Maybe another point here. A for open arrow, and then I can drag this like so. And again, if you need those files to work with in order to try to do the same kind of thing that I am, they're all in the description for this video, and you can download all of them, okay? And here we go. Let's switch over to the anchor point tool. I can never remember that hotkey. Shift C, that's so strange. And see, I'm just sort of like rounding out some stuff. A for the arrow, drag it over here. Okay, maybe I want to break this handle, which I have to do with my Shift C weird hotkey break handle tool, okay? And so that's another way that you could go about drawing, by starting with the sharp points switching between the open arrow, the A tool, and the Shift C convert tool to get those points to be rounded. And remember, the open arrow is for selecting and modifying handles, and the convert tool is for creating the handles and then breaking them so that they can move independent of one another. Okay, so now I've got that other shape, and that's pretty solid, and I can change its color using the eyedropper. Now, something interesting happens if you have your photo locked. No, it's not interesting at all. It actually still lets you select the color. That's awesome. What a relief. I'm confusing it with another application, but yeah, that worked great. I'm stoked. So I was able to get like this back mountain and then this front mountain, and then maybe I would make another little layer for this and another layer here and another layer for the big mountain in the front, but always extending everything down to the bottom of the frame. And that is just because of how After Effects interprets your layers, you know. So yeah, that color is just wrong. Click that little thingy here, the little belly button. Go over to the I for eyedropper. Get it? I. Anyways, I'm gonna go over here. Just make this back mountains a little bit lighter, because everything just keeps getting lighter as it goes back, right? So choose like a lighter color, and then it'll feel like it's pushed further back. And I can always double click this fill color right here in order to get more control over my color. So I'm just going to make that a bit lighter here. Yeah, and that's starting to look more, maybe a bit darker. Yeah, ta-da. Okay, so now I have light, darker, and then I'm going to go for darkest in the front. All right, so right here, and I will upload the final version of this once I have it so that you guys can see what that looks like. I'll put it in the description for the video. And always click that little belly button before you start drawing again, and then you can do your click, drag, and so on. Okay, now we've talked a lot about working with filled shapes, but what about working with lines? Working with lines is a whole other beast, and definitely worth understanding how they're different from working with filled shapes. So let me just pause on this one, and I'm going to move on to the to another example where I'm going to show you how to work with strokes. So making another new file. Actually, let me use my good old template. So open recent, blank AI file. Actually, yeah, HD document. And if I want to change this artboard after the fact, I can always go to the Artboard Tool, go to Properties, go to my width, and I can change that. As long as this little chain link thing is off, see that chain link? The chain link keeps your proportions. So if you changed this, let's say to 1080 at this point, see how it kept it 16:9 in proportions? That's not cool. So turn that off, and then you could change the width to, let's say, 1080, and now you have a nice square Instagram size, which is glorious. And you can go and save this as something else. So I'm going to go back to my this one folder, and I'm going to call this bottles. So with this bottles file, I'm going to bring in a photo once again, and I'm going to trace it out using lines instead. So here's my milk bottles. Don't link, hit place, drag, and yeah, fine. We'll just place it in the middle-ish, okay? And I'm going to, once again, belly button, properties, drop the opacity, and lock. Okay, so moving on to another layer there. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to show you a little bit about working with strokes. Now, strokes are just the line around your shape. That's all. So if you have a fill, you can pretty easily just change it to a stroke, right? Not necessarily. So it's important to kind of decide a little bit before you start working whether you're going to be using fills or strokes, because it is going to change your approach. So for example, for this picture, I might want to use the pen tool for this, and I would go in here and click and drag to get these nice shapes. And I'm going to draw the whole bottle because I am preparing this for animation, and the fact that someone might pick up this jug in the animation. Now, see what just happened here? I accidentally clicked off while I was drawing that jug. Ugh, what do you do then? Makes people crazy. What you do is you hover, don't click, and you'll see this nice little slash shows up next to your pen tool, okay? Doing this all with the pen tool. And click, and that will allow you to continue your shape, okay? And I'm just gonna click there, and meh, and meh. And once again, I totally forgot to put this guy, this reference image, above. There we go. And because it's white, I'm not seeing it. And while you're drawing, folks, you can always change the color. Just double click the color fill and let's say blue, fine. And then once again, you have to restart by clicking the little anchor point that you just made, okay? And if you're joining us late or you haven't chatted yet, please feel free to say hi so that I know you're here. Okay, so I made that shape, and then I want to make this, but I want it to be like super consistent, right? Because I understand a little bit about glass. My parents worked for Corning Glass, and they always, you know, would take us to these live demos where they would make these glass jugs and stuff. And it was very exciting, and they were very precise about having this handle be a consistent width all the way around. So to make that happen, you need to use a stroke. And I'm going to show you a pretty cool trick you can do with that. So I take the pen tool, let's say, and I'm going to swap right here using this little corner thingy, swapping fill and stroke. Ah, rats. I had my jug selected. That's a problem. So let me lock me jug, and I'm going to, actually, I'll just lock that path. So I did that by just swiveling open the layer, locking the path, making a new layer, not a new layer. I'm just gonna draw and it's gonna make a new path, okay? So I swap, and that's gonna allow me to draw with a stroke. And I'm gonna click, and this is just gonna be like the skeleton, like the inside of this handle. Okay, there it is. I hit A to switch to the anchor tool, and notice I didn't have to close this. We can't really see this line, so let me turn off my reference and let me go to properties for this line that I just drew. Yeah, you get properties for whatever you click on. It's awesome. Oh, hi, Carol. Welcome. Okay, so I'm gonna increase the stroke width. Yay. There's my stroke width, fantastic. Turning on the layer, and let's increase this some more. And I'm gonna move this down a little bit. Yeah, it's like weird doing YouTube live streaming because I'm so used to Zoom calls and I can like see who all is on the thing. And now I'm like, oh, who's here? I know Leah's here and Reiko's here, or they were, and Carlos and Carol. But if anybody else wants to make their presence known, feel free to just drop it in the chat. So, you know, if you're taking one of my graded classes, I can give you credit or whatever. All right, anyway, so now I've got my handle for that. But I want to get a stroke around everything, right? Like that was my goal. This was like my reason for life here. And we're not really going to be able to do that because it's already a stroke. So what we can do with a stroke, which is pretty sweet, you can go to Object, you can go to Shape and convert a path, like a stroke, to a shape. What? Okay, it didn't convert. Why didn't it convert? Let's switch over to the selection tool and try again. We will try again. Convert to shape, object not converted. Path, there we go. Ta-da! We can go to outline stroke. That's the thing, okay? So path, outline stroke, word. Look at that. Isn't that so clever? Illustrator, you are so clever. Okay, so then I can take both of these guys. So click in the belly button, shift click in the belly button, go to our friend the Pathfinder and click that first thing. Remember, this is our cookie cutter. It lets us combine shapes, cut shapes up, and so on. Sweet. Look at that. So now if I wanted to just outline that in some other color, I could double click on the stroke color. See how it says, I call this, this is my terrible pun here, I call it no stroking when it has that line. Get it? Because it's like no smoking. Sorry. So if you double click on that and then we make this like a dark blue, because we're not allowed to use black. Now I should have a little stroke there. I can go to properties and I can increase the stroke. Look at that. Not bad. Okay. Well, let's take a look at what this has resulted in. We have these like kind of sharp corners going on. It's all a uniform width, and you might want to mess with that a little bit. So if you don't like these sharp corners, some people find sharp corners to be unfriendly. I know, that's like so sort of silly, but it's a thing. You can go to stroke in the window, and it's going to give you this stroke window, which is deceptively small at first, right? Like it just tells you the width. So you have to double click it a couple times until you see all the things. And then you're like, oh, look, it's all the things. And then you click on the shape and then you go over here and you can choose whether you're going to have something that's rounded. Oh, look at that. That is very friendly, right? Or you can choose whether it's going to have sharp corners or if it's going to have mitered corners, right? I think that's what it's called. Bevel joins. I quite like rounded. I think rounded is actually quite friendly. And because this is all going to move together, I can add my details all into layer 2. So I can turn off the filling, so I'm just drawing lines. Yeah, I know. So I can do that just by clicking on that fill chip and then going down here and turning on none. Oh, rats, it was selected. That's why it didn't let me do it. So I'm going to click off of everything, then turn on no filling, and then go back in with my pen tool and draw this. And see how simply I'm drawing? Like I'm really not making very many points. If you're done drawing, if you're like, dude, release, hit the escape key. It gets rid of that. And then you can do like this, like that, and like this. Look at that. If you want to get rid of a point, you can hover over it with your pen tool. It gives you a little minus next to it. You can just click that and it be gone. And then, of course, you could change the width of these strokes that are meant to be details so that way it doesn't look so darn loud. So I can just go in here and make this other detail, escape, A key, and then make that like littler. So here's one, shift, shift, and either in the stroke window that's here or in the properties, I can drop the stroke width. Okay, so drop in that stroke width, ta-da, and now I have like this nice little detail in there. Not bad, okay? And funkiness can be good, folks. Like if you have like kind of a shaky line when you're tracing stuff, like let it be. It's all right. Don't worry about it. So I turn off my background there, and this looks weird because of my zoom. And yeah, it's all right now. We're good. And you can add more details to things. So if you wanted to add like these little areas of shine, for example, you could do that. Just make sure you lock the things that you don't want to screw up, and then choose the colors that you want. Let's say like a light blue. Grab up your pen tool, turn off your stroke, and then you can make like these little shiny areas and have that be like a little extra oomph. It took me a long time to figure this out, but having these little extra details really adds a lot of visual interest to a piece. So don't skimp on those details. Whenever you can, just add little things to make your visuals more interesting. Details are like, what do they say? God is in the details. So I did all that, and I turn off this, and this looks horribly stupid, and that's because it's not done. So I'm going to take these guys and, I'm going to take these little details and drag them below my lines, and I'm going to reduce their opacity. I can do that either using the properties or the transparency. It doesn't matter. And just click the little arrow to the left, and you can reduce the opacity of things if they're not all selected. Shift select, and then you can drop the opacity here. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, the devil is in the details. Oh, look at that. Yeah, I like that, Leah. Thank you. All right, so that's how you would go about adding some strokes to things. There's lots of fun stuff you can do in Illustrator. There's definitely like a plethora of tutorials that are out there. If you contact me, I'm happy to hook you up with some of those that are made by other folks and that I've made myself. But the rule of thumb I find is to just try to limit how many points you are using to create your illustrations. Try to keep things fairly simple. You can download colors. I've put a screenshot of some colors in here in the AI Basics folder. I really like the coolers.co website. They have some really beautiful color palettes you can choose from. And if you want to go by color number, let me just show you how to do that. So if you wanted to input a specific color number, like let's say I wanted it to be this color, 456990, you could click the chip with that object selected, double click, and see this little field right here. Yeah, 456990. Hit tab, and it'll take you to that color. It's kind of amazing. Hit OK, and now that's the color that I had chosen from the Coolers website, 456990, right? So you can use these, they call these hex codes or hexadecimal codes to get precise color on your Illustrator files. Just make sure that you're being real specific about the things that you are selecting. Okay, so what are some of the key differences between designing for print or the web versus designing for After Effects? Well, one of those key differences was really that you need to keep in mind how the thing is going to be animated and prepare things each on separate layers. So that way, when you have something in the foreground, other things are going to fall in, and then you have something in the background, for example. Or in the case of our mountains, you want each mountain layer to extend all the way down to the bottom so that if you do end up doing a little camera movement, like, oh, the mountains, they're separating and we're getting closer to this, you know, something like that, you don't want to see like an edge where something got cut off. That's going to look really silly. So make sure that where things overlap, you still include the whole thing. Like look at what this bottles thing. This bottle was technically behind the cup, but I still designed the entire bottle because otherwise that would have looked really strange if somebody picked up the bottle in the animation and there was a chunk missing out of it. Okay, so make sure that each thing you're going to animate separately is whole and is on its own layer. Okay, all right, so let me go back to my little slideshow here, and yeah, and the process for using a sketch as a basis is very, very similar. You really want to make sure that when you are creating stuff for more abstract motion design that you are thinking out the different ways that the thing could be animated in the process of designing. So one of the templates that I've shared with you guys is the multi-boards. And with the multi-boards, and I know some of you probably have to go, but I'll wrap this up in probably about 5 to 10 minutes. So in the multi-boards, I've laid out a whole bunch of storyboards. Let me show you how that looks in use. I have this file that I created for an animation project that I'm doing, and I put all of the storyboards right in there, and I designed each of the little pieces independent of one another. And by doing that, I kind of figured out my thought process, and it helped me to design the different frames that I wanted to go through. I created each of these layouts. How did I do it? I wasn't very careful with it. And the reason why I wasn't very careful with each of these layouts is really because I used a plugin for After Effects to be able to quickly get the layers from one program to the other. And that plugin, seriously, folks, has changed my life. I fully endorse it. It is called Overlord, and it made my life so much easier. Basically, it's an extension for After Effects and Illustrator. You put Overlord into each application, and you can literally like push specific layers from one program into the other. Yeah, so Overlord is fantastic. It's available from battleaxe.co. I will put a link into the description after we wrap. Okay, so Phyllis said, yes, always draw a complete shape so you can have more versatility later on. Absolutely. One other thing about versatility, the cool thing about Overlord, folks, is that you can actually connect text. Like you can send text directly over, and it's going to keep it in place. It's not going to screw up your layout. So no more like having to deal with Illustrator graphics but Photoshop text, or dealing with Illustrator text as a chunk that you can't animate with a lot of flexibility. In After Effects, Overlord changes all of that, and I will definitely show you how to use Overlord in a future video or live stream. Okay, guys? All right, so any questions on what I have talked about? All right, feel free to drop it into the chat. So let me go back to presentation mode, y'all. There we go. All right, so questions, anybody? All right, so shameless little plug here, folks. Feel free to drop questions into the chat while I talk about Illustrator for After Effects. So Illustrator for After Effects is a custom course that I've created through Kalika Effects, which is my little small group private training program. And it starts on October 21st, Wednesday nights. And if you're good at After Effects, but you're still learning Illustrator, or you're good at Illustrator, but you're still learning After Effects, this is for you. We do illustration, graphic design, and animation. Every project has both the design or illustration and the animation, which is really, really satisfying. It comes with a private Slack channel. Oh, thank you, Reiko. It comes with a private Slack channel, 2 hours of live class time every week. We also have weekly one-on-one office hours that I offer for all of my small group private training classes, up to a half an hour per student per week. And if you want $50 off of this course, you can use the promo code KFX-Don'tHateAI, all caps. Carol says, when I open the blank doc you supplied, I don't see the AE guides for safe zones. Oh, let me show you how to bring those up really quick. So going back to Illustrator, I know, I'm sorry, I found those files and I was so excited. I just uploaded them and I forgot to check whether they had the safe guides, and I'll just show you how to bring those up real quick. So if you aren't seeing safe guides, go to the properties for the artboard and then go to Artboard Options. Is it Artboard Options? Yeah, go to Artboard Options and it brings up this window. And they really hide this stuff on you. I'm sorry. On behalf of Adobe, I'm sorry, even though I don't work for them. Let me Yeah, right here. So display, it says show video safe areas, and that will let you get those video safe areas. And if you turn that off, they go away. And if you turn that on, they come back. Okay, so once you turn those on, just save your file again, and then you have them forever. All right, other questions, folks? Yeah, and the Illustrator for After Effects class, we do some pretty cool projects. They include things like drawing a landscape and animating it. We do a character and animate the character. We do a logo animation. We do some writing and drawing on. We also do either a Zentangle or a henna design and have that draw on. And there's all these little idiosyncrasies when it comes to working between the different programs that we cover that really get elucidated through this course. The students who took it just really enjoyed the whole process. It was really, really fun. And I'll link you guys to Vimeo in the description of this as well. All right, so that wraps it up, folks. I wanted to thank you for your time and your attention today, and feel free to drop me a comment, subscribe so that you can get more videos and live streams, and if you want to contact me, my email is in the description as well. Okay, well, thank you so much. Oh, Tiffany had a question. How long is the course? It's 6 weeks, meeting 2 hours per Wednesday night, and it's from 6 to 8 p.m. and it's live online via Zoom. I have students right now who, some of them are in Florida, some are here in the US. My Zoom classes are like global, so you can be anywhere in the world. All right. Oh, thanks everyone. All right, so if you have any other questions, feel free to drop it into. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.